Okay, so here, now, the native nuts. This is where I wanted to know. Okay, so if I'm a squirrel, if I'm a deer, if I'm a turkey, or if I'm a human, and I have choices, where would be my best choice if I'm making choices based on this? I don't think animals make choices based on, oh, I think that has too many calories or it's not enough. I think what they're doing is based on taste and what are they craving. So here's how it stacks up. Ozark Chinquapin in calories is actually not as incredible as some of the others that we're aware of. I do want to point out, if you think about what is the most important nut for wildlife, what are you going to say?
Today?
Today.
Why not?
Acorns. Look at where acorns are in the calorie count. Chestnut's doing very well, of course, still, but look at some of these in here. Now, if I'm not a squirrel, I can't eat black walnuts or butternuts or shagbark hickory. I can eat pecans, still got a shell on it, and I can eat hazelnuts. Now, it's funny to hear Mark or Pat talk about, oh yeah, you want to see some hazelnuts? Where I live, you don't see hazelnuts. I can't validate that hazelnut plants make hazelnuts because squirrels beat me to them. I've never seen one on the bush. So that is something that's very, very tasty for the wildlife. So that's just the calories. But it's, even though that doesn't look like it's top of the list, I want to remind you, these are all valuable nuts, and it's in the list. It's looking sharp. It's no slouch. It's not zero. We've got a valuable nut here. But it gets better. Take a look at the carbs. Now again, why is the Ozark Chinquapin so sweet? Part of it is because the nut has so much in terms of carbohydrates. The other side of the coin is this. It doesn't have a lot in terms of tannins. Tannins are very bitter. You'll see that in your white oaks and your red oaks, more so in your red oaks. And that tannin is very bitter. If you don't leach out the tannins from an acorn, they will make you sick and make you vomit. But if you leach them out, you can make flour and make a type of bread, and it's very tasty. And I have eaten it, and I did not vomit because the tannins were leached out. So you look at this, that's actually pretty good. It's a real good power source, immediate energy surge for anything that wants to eat this. Okay, protein. Ozark Chinquapin's very high in protein compared to some of your other nuts. Not doing too bad. But again, black walnut and butternut, they're hard to get into. So as a wildlife food, I'm still looking at something that's pretty doggone easy to get at. And if you're just going to swallow the nut like a turkey does, hazelnut and Ozark Chinquapin are high on the list. Low on the list with butternut and walnut. I'm not swallowing that. It's not going to be good. Total fat. Even though total fat in the Ozark Chinquapin is relatively high compared to other Castanea members, it's not necessarily a huge competitor compared to some of these other nuts. For example, if you are hungry and you want something to eat and it's going to stick with you, you might go for the pecan. Because of that higher fat content, it's a little slower to digest, and you're not going to have the sensation of hunger as quickly after eating one of those nuts. Dietary fiber, it doesn't do too terribly bad, but it's not the top dog either. Okay, now I apologize. There's one thing that I've learned in my life, that if you want to put people to sleep, use a bunch of graphs, and if you want to put them to sleep really fast, use nothing but words. So I apologize, that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so next I want to go to commercially available nuts. Now this is really just people at this point I'm looking at it. So if we've got to make choices as a consumer, let's pretend in a perfect world we've restored this nut, we now have orchards of this thing, and it's on the grocery store's shelves. So when you look at that nutrition label, what are you going to see? You're a comparison shopper, you're trying to find things you want to eat. Alright, so let's look at this. How does Ozark Chinquapin stack up? In terms of calories, it's not too bad. It's above cashews, which I love cashews. They're good. But there are lots of other nuts that are far better in that category. But in carbohydrates, yet again, look at the Ozark Chinquapin. Nails it. It does it within the family. It does it within North America. And then everybody else that gets in the ring, it just puts them down. Knocks it out of the park. So carbohydrates, it is a sweet tasting nut full of carbohydrates. Good stuff. Fortunately, there's lots of other things besides the carbs there. Protein. Actually, that's not a bad evaluation right there. That's really good. It's in the lower third, but it stacks up pretty nice. Total fat. Not as much as some of your other nuts might have. And And then dietary fiber. Remember, dietary fiber was one that wasn't quite as high in as some of the other nuts, and it shows also with the commercially available nuts. Okay, so in that perfect world, you've got this label, and it tells you all the nutritional values. You're going to find that Ozark Chinquapin is high in calories, carbohydrates, protein, and dietary fiber. You're going to find that's high in vitamin A and K, it's got trace amounts of minerals. Bottom line, I don't care who you compare this nut to, it is nutritious. Is it the best of the best in every case? No. But it can hold its own. Is it worth choosing? Yes. Without a doubt, this is a nutritious nut for wildlife and for people. So there's a lot going for this particular plant. So in summary, you've got, out of the chestnut family, it's a heavy hitter. They compete very well with native nuts here in North America. And they hold their own against commercially produced nuts. And keep in mind, those commercially produced nuts have been crossed and bred for certain traits. So we're talking about taking a wild item and comparing that to something that has been bred from other things, and it still is a very valuable nut to have in your home. So, when I talk to people about what's the value of a species, it's easier to convey to someone how valuable a species is when you have something like this to portray. The dulcimer that was out, that is valuable. People look at that and say, that looks cool. That's a pretty wood. They hear the music that comes from that dulcimer and they say, that's pretty. I like that. That has value. When they see the nutritional value, they say, oh, that clearly is a very valuable species. That helps. It isn't necessary to have those kind of things to have value in an ecosystem, but it sure does help convince people that are not aware of all the connections of all living things. So that makes it a slam dunk, easy choice. Is the Ozark Chinquapin worth saving? I argue, yes. Unequivocally, it is worth saving. And the only question is, if you think it's valuable and you realize it's declining, then you have to do something about it, so join the effort. That's what I say to anybody who wants to know any more about that. And Steve, do we have some Chinquapins that we can crack open for anybody who has not eaten Ozark Chinquapin?
Feather just asked a while ago about it. I've got some over here that are anywhere from 1 to 3 years old, and I've just now perfected how to keep them. But if somebody wants to, yeah, we've got some over here. If you have a little mold spot on them, don't eat them. Some of this was experimental stuff, and so you may be part of the learning curve, so to speak. But some of them, though, like I told Feather, we're going to do a trade for native Cherokee seed. I'm going to give her some Chinquapins here. Right. I'll have some ripe ones in September. But if you've not eaten them before, they're absolutely incredible.
We had just a few folks that had not raised their hand. I really want to make sure that those individuals have an opportunity. I saw several hands go up. I would gladly abstain so that someone else could have the opportunity to say yes. That is a tasty nut. That's worth saving. And I hate to make it sound like something has to have that kind of value for people to say it needs to be saved, but it's a place to start. And let's face it, we make choices based on our pocketbook and our stomach. Get on the bandwagon, folks. I think it works. Let's move this truck forward. Does anybody have any questions?
AJ, I'm sorry, I apologize. I missed a little bit right after you first started. Did you tell them the story behind this analysis, how much it cost, and how it was possible?
A little bit. The only thing I didn't mention was that it was about $1,000 to get that done. It was a tube.
Oh, it's close to $1,600.
Yeah, that's what it was.
$1,500 and something.
Yeah, it was not a cheap analysis, and as I had choices to make. So okay, so this is how much money you've got, and which nutrients do you want? Steve, they're asking me questions! What am I supposed to do with this? So we made the best choice we could. If we wanted to look at some of the other trace minerals or vitamins, we could send a sample back in. But here's the thing I noticed. The analysis that Steve did with, and I forget the name of the company that he used, but it was a place that does animal feed analysis. And there are some things they do not test for. They don't care. They don't do that examination. Well, even with the stuff that they did do that's apples to apples, in other words, calories, protein, and all that, there are differences. Now, keep in mind that crops are different from year to year, even though you're growing them on the same place. I would hazard that the nuts probably didn't come from the same place, same soils, same weather conditions, and everything that's important for growth. And we all know that you can have a crop failure one year, and the next year things are great. So there were slight discrepancies, and you're going to have discrepancies geographically around the nation. So when you look at some of this stuff, you could have some changes, and there were modifications between that first study and this UBE. So what I tried to do was stay very consistent, only use the UBE, except where maybe the other company had done an analysis that we didn't choose to pay for through UBE. Anybody who is interested in the full write-up, I'd be happy to mail that little one-page sheet that's got all the data on it. It does require a little bit of interpretation. All they do is give you a two-page sheet that's got all the info on it. I cross my eyes and I sit down for weeks trying to figure out what this meant and how to make that standard with what I'm seeing on the USDA website. It was a fun project. I'm glad I did it. I eventually want this on the website. I want people to see this because I think the more people would know about it, they would say, well, why are we not helping with this? Yeah, that's my question. Let's move. Let's go. Thank you all very much. Oh, yeah, question.
For all your studies, with the people in the game and fish, did they by any chance say that the deer were healthier when we had Chinquapin breeds?
Okay, that's a good question. That is actually one that is dealt with through anecdotal examples. For example, you're going to have bears that are much more healthy if they have a consistent nut crop every year. With acorns, you have nut crop failure. Sometimes you have the white oaks fail, sometimes the red oaks fail. In some years, depending on how that went, you might have a failure that particular year for both species. And as it turns out, there's not a lot to eat at that point. So back when the chestnuts and the Chinquapins were available, they were a consistent food source. So were the animals healthier going into winter? Absolutely. Would they have been better off in terms of how many they produce, in terms of litters of animals? Yes, the answer is yes. There is a link between nutrition and when you give birth as a mother, as far as was it year 3 or is it year 4? And the healthier an animal is, the more quickly they are reproductively active. The number of animals that you can give birth to can go up due to nutrition. So the short answer is, yes, there is a link to that. Has it been established for the Ozark Chinquapin before and after the blight? No. So I'm making a supposition based on what I know about other nutritional studies that deal with reproduction and health in animals. Good question, and I'm dancing around it. I'm saying yes, but not solidly.
If I could make a comment on what Sally Ann said. I'm a hunter, I hunt, and like a lot of people, I put out trail cameras, and I put out like the corn thing, sling the corn out. And if you go to Walmart now, things are changing. If you look now, they're saying now that actually with the chestnuts, they're saying that for thousands of years, deer, that's been their choice food to eat, over the acorns. And from what I've seen already, they're saying that deer or any wildlife that eats the chestnut, the meat has a noticeably better flavor to it. Yeah. And AJ and I were talking about all this. We are on the cusp of something brand new, a new kind of food here. A lot of people want to eat healthy, and you've got this one that's not fertilized. It doesn't have anything done, and you can look at it probably 4 out of 5 times. It beat about every category around it, though. And so, as far as the food source coming back, if you want to eat healthy, this is it. Everyone has a magnesium deficiency they're talking about right now, and it's because of phosphate fertilizers that we use. And it's because the plants cannot uptake those nutrients, the magnesium in it. And so here you've got the healthiest food you can probably get. So there's a lot of pages waiting to be written about how this can be used, though. So
I want to add on to that. You talked about the taste. I talked to an old guy that grew up down in southeast Missouri swamps, and he grew up with his dad being a market hunter and then a guide for St. Louis businessmen. And he said, I hated the taste of duck. And I said, okay, it didn't bother me too much that he said that. I said, why'd you hate the taste of duck? He said, it tasted like crawdads. And I thought, what? That just really blew my mind. I've eaten duck and it never once, no matter how it was fixed, well or not well, it never tasted like crawdads. Come to find out, the St. Louis businessmen would come down in March when the birds were breeding, and they would hunt then, which was legal at the time, and shoot these birds when they were in their plumage for breeding. And what were they eating at that time? Crustaceans, which are related to crawdads. Now, ducks that are harvested today taste a little more gamey, in my opinion. And that's because they're eating things, plant material, acorns and things of that nature that is then getting into their system. So you are what you eat. And if deer were to eat more Ozark Chinquapins than they would acorns, we would not have to marinate them quite so long to get some of that tannic acid taste out of the meat. So yeah, there's a lot to that. More pages to be written, as Steve said. For the sake of time, if you've got questions, come find me. I have some of this written down on that very back corner table. There's a thing on there that says Nuts About Nutrition. It's got my graphs, got the write-up on it. You're welcome to one. Thank you all for your attention. Appreciate your time.